And I'm going to pass it off to Jessica.
Sure, great. Thanks so much, Bridge. Because we have a small group tonight, I'm going to go ahead and run through the slides at a moderate tempo and then open it up to a small discussion at the end. So if you have a question, feel free to log it in the chat or write it down, and then we can get to them all at the end. So my name is Jessica Ensman. I'm a senior organizer with the Sierra Club, talking tonight about the Climate Action Council scoping plan. So I have a couple of slides that I can share with you all. So this is our chance to influence the next 10-year plan for climate emission reductions in New York. Throughout the presentation, we'll be going over a review of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the governing body that is the Climate Action Council, what is in the scoping plan, the draft scoping plan that is out, our plan to win as advocates, how to get involved, existing resources, and then a question and answer. So if you can entertain the scoping plan as this extended metaphor of building a house, okay, that's okay. If you could entertain the scoping plan as an extended metaphor of building a house, that's where we're going to go with this. So in the past, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act was passed. So in 2019, advocates from across the state of New York were involved in this push. It establishes a comprehensive climate action procedure. It is one of, if not the most aggressive climate laws in the nation. And many folks and many organizations around New York State were what got this moving and what got it passed, including New York Renews, a coalition of organizations, and then many member groups and folks. So it was an amazing win for New York and for the country, really, to have a precedent-setting climate plan. And so within the climate plan, there are these guide rails that are mapped out. So I'm just going to read a few, like 100% zero carbon electricity by 2040, 70% renewable electricity by 2030, and then some even more specific milestones like 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. So the CLCPA, a piece of legislation that passed in 2019, made these parameters or goals of that legislation law. So they're codified. The state has to reach these different percentages and goals legally to enforce our climate plan and to enforce the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So if you imagine all the policies that we would need for Green New York State as a house, these are the parameters. So these here are the parameters of that house. The scoping plan is the blueprint of how we get there, and the Climate Action Council is the architectural firm that is building that house. So we want to make sure if we're building a house that it's livable, that it has a bathroom, that it has a kitchen, that it doesn't poison us when we're inside. So that's what we're doing here, is building this house through this extended scoping plan. And once the scoping plan is approved, once the blueprint is approved, it doesn't mean that every piece of the house is built. Like, we still have to do very detailed and intense work to make sure like the kitchen is built to code, or that how do we actually turn on 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind. So these are the parameters, the blueprint, the guideline, getting coalesced around what we want to see for the state. And then of course, after finalizing the scoping plan, actually doing it. So in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that passed in 2019, it stood up a Climate Action Council. So this is the decision-making body of the CLCPA. It has 22 folks on it. 11 of those folks are heads of departments and agencies at the state level. So for instance, the Department of Environmental Conservation Commissioner Basil Sagos, the NYSERDA authority head, the CEO and president, Doreen Harris, and 12, right, 10, 11, 12, yeah, 23 folks, I think, sorry about that. 12 of those folks are agency heads. The other 10 appointees, sorry, I can't do simple math right now for some reason. The other 10 appointees are stakeholders, and some of those stakeholders are friends like Environmental Advocates of New York. They have really climate-driven priorities, and they want to see the most emission reductions and electrification possible. And some of those folks are opposition. So For instance, Gavin Donahue from the Independent Power Producers and Donna DeCarlios of the National Fuel Gas are folks that have fossil fuel interests that are on this decision-making body. So the Climate Action Council was given recommendations by different advisory panels and working groups, and they distilled those recommendations into a final scoping plan. Right now it's in a draft form. Importantly, it was also tasked with taking into account the recommendations of a climate justice working group, which was made up of frontline leaders from across the state. So the CLCPA puts equity and justice at the heart of our state's transition to a clean economy. Its explicit goal is to ensure that no one, rural, suburban, or urban, rich or poor, Black, brown, or white, blue collar or white collar is left behind in our transition. Part of the CLCPA mandate is a definition of disadvantaged communities, which will receive more than 35% of all benefits of state funding through our state's climate programs. And the definition of a disadvantaged community is now being finalized through a similar state process. So in plain speak, the funding for the CLCPA will be billions of dollars. I don't know where it's coming from yet, but like how we get there throughout 10 years, there's going to be billions of dollars at play, and 35% of that money has to legally go to communities that are fall into the definition of disadvantaged, so that these folks can actually see the benefits of electrification and transition. So the draft scoping plan came out in January of this year. It has sections on every sector of our economy. It's 861 pages, about 500 pages of appendix, and suggests actions for the state agencies and state legislature to take. As defined by the state, the draft scoping plan serves as an initial framework for how the state will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and achieve net zero emissions, increase renewable energy usage, and ensure climate justice. So the scoping plan is the blueprint. The regulations or legislation is the components of the House. So just to go over what I said in really simply, in 2019, the CLCPA passed. It was a huge win. It made this process start. That's never been done before. It was a little messy, but we're working through it. In 2022, we're finalizing this draft scoping plan. And then in 2023 and onward, there would be continued efforts to make sure things are actually moving and happening in the right timeline, and that the state is held accountable to its plan. So what does it say in that 800 pages? Our big picture assessment is that it's good, but it's a comprehensive start, but it needs a bolder hand. And so what do I mean by that? Really distilled down into like really simple points. A couple of sectors pulled out of the scoping plan. The power sector, the scoping plan says maybe a ban on gas, but probably not. We say gas ban now. For transportation, the scoping plan says we should probably drive less, and when we do drive, we should probably drive better. We say, what are we going to do, when, where, and how? For waste, the scoping plan says big business should be responsible for its waste and pollution. And again, we say, so what are we going to do, when, where, and how? And for buildings, the scoping plan says we understand that fossil fuel heating and cooling is bad, but we're going to figure it out later. We say come out strongly in support of a 2024 date for all electric new construction. So the scoping plan is like broad strokes, saying the right things about climate, saying like fossil fuel is bad, that we need to shift, that a transition is necessary, but it's very shaky on any interim milestones or any real years. So our movement has definitely been asking to bolster the scoping plan and to have real interim targets. So this way we can actually reach our goals. And the codified portions of the legislation. So throughout the scoping plan, the Climate Justice Working Group, a group of climate and environmental justice leaders from around the state, consistently advocated for the boldest and strongest plan to address climate change. Their recommendations were noted, but not adopted by the scoping plan. So again, we see the legislation saying that we're putting equity and justice at the heart of the plan, but when the Climate Justice Working Group gives its recommendations to the Climate Action Council. Their recommendations are noted but not adopted. So again, they're like saying the right thing. It's great that they have a Climate Justice Working Group, but if we're not listening to our frontline partners and we're not adopting those perspectives into the scoping plan, then we're not actually doing the work. So that's another piece that we've been supporting at the state level, is that we should be following and listening to the Climate Justice Working Group. So those were just a few sectors. There's many more in the scoping plan, from agriculture and forestry, land use, local governments, nerdy data stuff, and much more. So I've linked in these slides that I can share with Bridge and share with you all the link to all 860 pages of the scoping plan. And then we also, as Sierra Club, have broke down a couple of sectors into one-pagers in our Sierra Club testifying guide, which I can also share with folks. So electricity, transportation, waste, lands and forests, and buildings. We've distilled the scoping plan down to one-pagers for folks who might want to read up on those sectors. So our plan to win as advocates. So far we went over the process that got us the draft scoping plan. We went over very broadly what's even in the 800 pages of the draft scoping plan. But as advocates, like, what is our plan to win? Like, what does winning look like, and what can we do to support a bold, aggressive climate plan? So we're having internal and external pressure. So what does that mean? We say no, well, I say in my corny metaphors, no diamond without pressure. So here is an image. On the left, we have fossil fuel interests, and on the right, we have climate advocates. So on the left, fossil fuel interests have inertia, they have media, they have think tanks, they have access to politicians, they have money. So what do we mean by that? Like, we already use fossil fuels to fuel our homes, a lot of us. It is the technology that has been around. These folks are powerful with money. They have specific interests in making money to continue the fossil fuel infrastructure. And they have a leg up in that political way, where they can donate campaign contributions to electeds and to really see their ideals play out in the government space. So what do we have as advocates? We have organized people, and we can make sure that our voices are heard, and that we can pressure our elected officials with that organized story throughout the whole state. And so I can go into more about what that looks like in the next couple of slides. So internal pressure. Sierra Club and other organizations, including New Yorker News and Earth Justice and other orgs, are drafting technical comments, are circulating sign-on letters to partner organizations to show broad organizational support. Folks are having meetings with state agencies, with governors' office staff, with the Climate Action Council members themselves. There's definitely this internal sort of professional play with lawyers and lobbying and technical comments and engineers. That's definitely happening. We're pressuring there. But where does it come in for grassroots advocacy? So where that comes in is the external pressure. So what we're doing is letters to the editor, signing grassroots comments, testifying at the public comment hearings, and social media amplification. So this way we have the internal pressure of technical comments and lobbyists and all of these people gaining pressure on the inside. And then on the outside at the public hearings and front facing with the media, we have grassroots folks also building pressure and supporting the same interests. So this is a picture of a group of Stony Brook University students that went to the CLCPA public hearing in Nassau County back in 2019, and then it eventually passed that session. So this is a picture I really love. So why should we testify? Like, maybe you might think like the state's going to do its thing. It already passed the scoping, like the CLCPA, the scoping plan is going to move. Well, there are people actively working against our interests. So for instance, the American Petroleum Institute has been running ads about the scoping plan with the tagline that we should decide what fuels our home, not the government. And here is a clip from their Facebook contributions page that shows since May of 2018, the American Petroleum Institute has put over 6 million into ads on Facebook. And from March 25th to 31st of 2022, they spent $46,700 on ads on Facebook. And so this geography is the entire United States, but it gives you a perspective into how much money the opponents of our ideals are actually willing to put into actively working against us and our asks. So 6 million since 2018 is quite a pretty penny for ads on Facebook alone. So this is one organization and one social platform. So this gives you, again, that's the entire United States, but wanting to give you an insight into the opposition. Also, last week, there was a Climate Action Council hearing about the draft scoping plan in Brookhaven on Long Island. I personally was there. Our folks did a really great job. We had a rally of 40 folks, 30 of those folks spoke. We were on message, we were connected. We tried our best to have our hearing be accessible, to have our folks masked up. Like, we made sure to have fruit and water and hand sanitizer and chairs for folks that needed them. And like, we really had a strong partnership amongst ourselves. And so we did a really great job. But on the flip side, we did have an incredible show of opposition in Brookhaven. Over 350 laborers arrived, of which about 15 spoke in direct opposition of our asks. So we had folks either calling for a stall on electrification and asking for things like gas to persist, as well as hydrogen to be introduced instead of electrification, or even in addition to electrification. There was sort of this like tech agnostic, all of the above approach that the opposition was asking, which was a direct opposition to our points of a ban on gas and electrifying buildings by 2024. So that was not great. We were completely outnumbered. On a great note, we did outspeak them, and we definitely had a stronger narrative and talking points that actually got to the heart of what the scoping plan was about. But at the end of the day, that was a big show of force to any elected official that the unions on Long Island are going to show out when the elections come for their ideals. So this is definitely what we're coming up against, is when we are, as a climate movement, want to make sure that we're talking about our ideals, that we're really pushing out on that opposition is alive and well. So upcoming hearings on April 27th at 3:30 p.m. at the Buffalo and Erie Public Library, there will be another public hearing for the Buffalo folks. Before the 3:30 p.m. start time, at about 2:30 p.m., folks in the area will be having a rally and press event. So Push Buffalo is leading that cause. I know a couple of folks are going to come and speak. Hopefully we get some press. The opposition will definitely be there. In Brookhaven, we had a press event, the same thing, like an hour before the rally, the actual start time, and the opposition were there, same time, same place. And so it's great for us to be there, to be supportive of our ideals, to show out and to rally as a community. And there are other hearings across the state as well. So 2 of them have passed. One of them is happening right now, actually. It's probably wrapping up in Binghamton. And then Albany, Syracuse, Brooklyn, and Tupper Lake. There are also 2 virtual hearings if you feel uncomfortable during COVID to attend physical hearings. That's totally worthwhile and purposeful. We just do encourage folks that have comfortability with attending an in-person event that's incredibly purposeful, because the opposition will physically be there as well. So when it comes to like making sure we show out in support of our ideals, that's visually in the room as well. So that's a personal choice on people's comfortability. So what to expect when you get to the hearing. So folks will likely walk in together from the rally outside, and then people who speak will have 2 minutes to speak. So that's about 250 words. If you've pre-registered online, which I have the link I could share with you all, you will have to check in at a desk. Then you'll receive a postcard with your name and a group number on it. You'll be seated. There'll be a brief 30-minute presentation from the Climate Action Council about what's in the scoping plan and their findings. And then there'll be 2 microphones. Groups will be called up in, like, they're going to call group 1 and group 2 to a specific microphone. And then the moderator will go back and forth from microphone 1 to microphone 2 until group 1 and group 2 are exhausted. And then they will call the next groups up in order. And then from that point on, folks that didn't register online have time to register in person. And then if there's any time left over, they'll just call folks up to be able to speak if they would like to. Oopsies, sorry, that's not, I gave these to a Sierra Club specific group, but it doesn't have to say that here. So it's important to identify yourself as a supporter or volunteer of any organization that you feel connected to. Sort of in the same vein, if you think of the opposition, like coming up and continuously saying like what labor partners they are a part of, like what labor union they're a part of, or what local they're a part of, it shows that there's an organized effort to concentrate on this scoping plan from that organization. So it's good to identify yourself as part of another organization. You'll speak for 2 minutes. If you're going to speak, you could practice it to help yourself feel more comfortable. You could make it personal and talk about why this process matters to you. And you can also include a few facts, but you don't have to worry about including highly technical information. It would be sort of impossible to get across a ton of technical information in 2 minutes. So don't worry about that too much. Linked here for folks to click through are some examples of top line asks. I think that the Clean Air Coalition might have some talking points specifically that they would like to uplift that are important to you all locally or into your charge as an organization. So this will be here for if folks want to use this as a tool. And then there's also talking points that we'll share around from the Sierra Club has ours, New Yorker News has theirs, and I think as well the Clean Air Coalition will have specific pieces for folks to bring up if they choose to speak at the public hearing. So here's another link of stuff, Sierra Club resources, and that's the end of my presentation. So before I look at the chat or open to questions, I'm just going to try to do like a brief wrap up, sort of put it all together. So in 2019, legislation passed that started this whole process. The Climate Action Council is the decision-making party of the scoping plan. A draft scoping plan came out in January of this year. Sector expansive, a ton of recommendations. Climate advocates are showing up at these 8 in-person public hearings to specifically advocate for climate action to continue, to be rapid, to be responsible, to include climate justice and equity, and to cut greenhouse gas emissions. We've seen a large turnout of opposition directly opposing our asks and asking for this process to stall. So it's very important for us to be there advocating for it to continue. And if you need any help testifying or writing comments for the Buffalo hearing, which is on April 27th, feel free to reach out to me for any of that help. And I'll be sure to send around some resources about creating testimony, if that's helpful for folks.
Thank you, Jessica. That was great. I will be sending out the Sierra Club like one-pagers to everyone, so everyone can like look those over. As far as like clean air specific talking points, things that I've noticed, you know, in the plan, like we'll be like, when I speak, I'll be echoing some of New Yorker News's things, but like I noticed, you know, like brownfields, like you know, are not uplifted as much within the plan as like air for cleanup, as like you know, as part of the process of you know of reclaiming waterfront land in particular, which you know is pretty vital for flood protection. And then the other thing is like we have a campaign around proof of work cryptocurrency that's we're like partners have asked us to make sure like you know, like that be uplifted you know, within the campaign, within the hearings, because it's not mentioned at all within the plan. We have a couple questions. We have some questions here from Maria. On the Climate Action Council, how many CAC members are open to? Oh, go ahead. Maria, did you want to go ahead?
No, I really didn't. I'm just listening. I didn't know I was going to be speaking, so I'm listening to you, Bridge.
Yeah, I just heard your mic start to make some noise. So Maria was asking,
Yeah,
how many on the Climate Action Council are open to your opinion of the draft, oppose, or fall somewhere in the middle?
Great, thanks. So now let me do this simple math. There's 12 folks that are on the council who are state agency staffers. So those folks really are going to share the opinion of the governor by extension, like by extension of the governor's power. They are her employees and like her direct staffers. So they're going to be swayed by like what the governor feels. So somebody we're talking to who's not even in the room is the governor, and she has a primary coming up. So making sure we show out, like there's some correlation there between like, if we're going to come out and talk about climate, then we're going to show up at the polls and vote on climate. So that's definitely a power dynamic that's in the room. And then for the 10 other folks, so there's 22 people, 12 folks are state agencies, and then 10 are stakeholders. Only 2 of them are our direct and hard opposition. So Gavin Donahue of the Independent Power Producers of New York and Donna DeCarlios of the National Fuel Gas are folks who are fossil fuel, like those are fossil fuel organizations. And so they have like a vested interest in continuing our fossil fuel infrastructure and keeping fossil fuel powering our homes and electric grid. So those 2 are really against us. And the other folks are a varying spectrum of support to like indifference. Folks like the Environmental Advocates of New York are strong supporters of our work, where somebody like Paul Shepson is a professor from Stony Brook University. So he falls like less like to our less out of support into like more of a middle ground. But if you think about the power dynamic of this voting body, if you capture the heart and soul, like mind of the governor, then you would be able to like push our ideals forward, because that's the majority of the voting body. But I encourage folks to open up the state website with all the different appointees listed and see if they have any intel on where they think folks would lie.
Yeah, and I think like we should expect to see like significant folks from National Fuel, like, at this hearing, because of like, like how much of the headquarters are here in Western New York. So like that's a something to definitely keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's, from a political perspective, a lot of emphasis and interest in Buffalo as Governor Hochul's hometown, or where she's from. So I think people also, like, I would imagine there's going to be a flood of letters to the editors or op-eds, like trying to catch the governor's attention by talking to a place that they think she has a personal connection to, or she does have a personal connection to. So yeah, definitely National Fuel Gas will be there. I think the IBEW on Long Island and in the Bronx, we saw steam fitters and plumbers as well, different local unions. A word of caution, I would say, is that it did get a little rowdy in Brookhaven, to say the least. There was over 350 folks there in opposition to our views. The 40 of us stayed we had our blinders on and we didn't engage or provoke. So we were able to like skirt any incredibly dangerous situation, but there is some level of heckling or booing that did happen. So it was quite tense, and I think people should feel like comfortable to protect themselves and their community and like make sure people feel supported. It was definitely emotional, and to go home at the end of it was frustrating and sad, and like we had like a group text of folks that were like trying to hold each other up and like leave room for that frustration. And I do believe that there will be opposition in Buffalo as well. So it's something to expect and anticipate that will be there as well.
Yeah. And I think we should be able to turn out some pretty big numbers though, of supporters. Push usually brings out, like a a pretty hefty, like rowdy crew of their own. So I think as long as we all like try and bring a friend, what we should have like a good number there.
Yeah.
Are there other questions for Jessica tonight? All right. Well, I'm not seeing any, so I think we'll wrap up. Thank you again, Jessica, especially I think Maria knows. I don't know if Jarrett knows, but I came down with COVID like this past weekend. So like I'm really appreciative that Jessica was able to like lead up the hosting on this.
No problem. I hope you feel better, continue to feel okay. And I'll just offer at the end, like Maria and Jarrett, if I'm sure like Bridge is taking some time to feel better, but you can always reach out to me. I'd be happy to be helpful with any testimony or comments that you might have questions on, or any clarification tomorrow when you're like, wait, this actually doesn't make sense to me. And just feel free to email me. And I would just add that you definitely don't have to be an expert to testify. Like even if you just get up there and you say like, I support climate action, like that'll just maybe you're not speaking directly to the draft scoping plan, but like that'll be just another person that spoke in the interest of our advocacy. And so like it definitely gets like tallied in our favor, and it plays into this bigger sort of theater in a way of like political will. So I mean, like, go for it. I say go for it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. That's awesome. I might follow up with you, but I pre-registered. I plan to be there. This sounds good. And Bridge, I hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, I do too. So yeah, I'll email out resources to everyone following up on this tomorrow. And yeah, thank you again, Jessica, and thank you, Jarrett and Maria, for being here tonight. And yeah, we'll wrap up with that.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.